Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Get Visible, a podcast for small business owners, helping them to grow, have a sustainable business, and get more visibility online. I'm Dawes Brown, and I'll be bringing you SEO and digital marketing tips, as well as interviews and conversations with other small business owners. So, let's get started. Today's episode is about pivoting, podcasting, and standing out. And to discuss this topic, I'm joined by Adelaine Ng. Adelaine had almost 20 years of experience interviewing thought leaders, adventurers, health professionals, celebrities, musicians, and entrepreneurs. A fun fact that recently occurred to her is that she's interviewed 3 Bond movie stars thanks to her time at MediaCorp Singapore and Radio Australia, the international arm of the ABC. Now, she's currently focused on 3 pursuits: writing and podcasting for the travel trade industry, helping to grow non-profit soccer academies with World Cup players, and direct response copywriting to help good products and services stand out in a noisy market. Her podcast, Upon Arrival, Events and Incentives, launched in lockdown conditions and went to the top 5 in 4 countries on Apple Podcasts in 2020. So, let's welcome to the Let's Get Visible podcast, Adelaine.
Thank you so much, Doris.
Welcome. And thank you for being part of the podcast. As mentioned in the introduction, you also have a podcast and you launched it in lockdown as well during 2020. Now, it's going great guns, and I'd love to begin this podcast at this point here. So, what was the driving force for you behind launching that podcast?
Yeah, a lot of podcasts were birthed during COVID-19, and I think your podcast was also birthed during those conditions. So it was podcasting was something I wanted to do for maybe about 4 years since, I left my radio job. I'd done radio, as you mentioned in the intro, for 15 years, and I didn't want to lose my radio sort of muscle. I didn't want to go back really into the radio industry. What the team that I was working with, the kind of content we were producing, the kind of audience we were producing for, there wasn't just a similar outlet unless I moved to a different country, which I wasn't prepared to do at my old age. I was thinking, I really love interviewing people, getting their stories. It just makes the world so interesting and you stay inspired. I thought, what can I do? So I always thought about podcasting, and I just could not decide on a topic. Let's do one on how new Asian migrants who come to Australia, for example, find it so difficult to find work at the level they used to enjoy. That was a really valid area. But then I just thought, how many topics can I go with this and stuff like that? And then I would ding dong between different topics. I also love food creators as well. I'm like, so I just left it because it's so easy to get busy as well. And it's easy when you've never done something to keep putting it off. When lockdown came, what I had found myself doing is travel trade writing, and how I even got into that job is an amazing story, because I thought an opportunity came for me to work as a volunteer for a radio show called Travel Writers Radio. Right. And I thought maybe this was one way I don't lose my skills. And so I thought, sure, I'll do that. So when the opportunity came up, I thought it's no pressure. There's no real deadlines. There's no real ask of you have to put in a certain number of stories every week. So it was all, really easy. And I thought, travel, I'm like, who doesn't want to do interviews on that? And in my time there, a couple of months later, an opportunity came up where one of the team members had to go on maternity leave. And I was asked whether I wanted to fill in her role, travel trade writing for a magazine. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can do that. And the thing was, that job was nothing like what I thought it was going to be.
All right.
I thought it was going to be fairly easy, taking a couple of press releases and just reworking them to make them a little bit more interesting and to adapt to your audience. I thought, yeah, sure, I can do that. I've got plenty of experience in that.
Yeah.
But I found that the learning curve was so steep, and they did not want me to work from press releases because that's what they could do, but to actively look for stories. And I thought for a B2B, it was a really steep learning curve. There was so much I had to learn about the industry, and I was ready to give up 3 months into it because I was like, this is so much work and the pay is not very much at all. And I was thinking of giving up that job when I got a call saying, do you want to go to New Zealand? And opportunities come up. And I'm like, wow, New Zealand's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
And this was about 4 years ago. And I thought, sure. And I'm like, this changes everything. And that trip was amazing. And I began to understand the industry. But that trip took us, I met with a couple of other members, about 5 other sort of sellers or buyers in the industry, event planners who were from Southeast Asia. Right. And we met in Christchurch and made our way through Queenstown, Wanaka, and ended up in Auckland. Mm-hmm. But we did skydiving, we did jet boating, we went on a helicopter that went up to the snow-capped mountains, and when we arrived at the top, they popped champagne for us. I'm like, what on earth is this? And then I began to understand the world of incentive business and how all these destinations were vying for the business tourist, because the business tourist spends 2 to 3 times more than the regular tourist. I remember how I would travel. I would look for probably a mid-range hotel, something not too expensive, so that I can still have some change to experience the destination, maybe eat in some nicer places. So you pick and choose how much you want to spend. You're a little bit more conservative, or I am anyway.
That's so true. Yep.
And this way, they were planning your whole itinerary and they did not hold back. So you got the best experiences, the best food. They'll pick you up in a limo. I'm like, I did not understand. I was like gobsmacked. So that's part of that world. There's also the associations, conferencing side of things, and how each destination is vying for that business. So every state in Australia has a bureau that fights for that business. And every country, as a country as well, you're pitting country against country. This is worldwide. They're all pitting for business. They're pitting against each other for that business because it's lucrative. And when COVID hit, that whole world just came to a stop. Yeah. No events, no travel. And people were looking at the best years for their business coming to a complete standstill. And as you can imagine, people are going, what am I going to do with this business? All these cancellations, nothing is happening. What do we do? Do we do virtual? And some people were finding that virtual, the ROI isn't quite there. And everyone was just disillusioned and just in a headspace that was confused and emotionally also quite draining. So I had spoken to event planners who they just had to have a cry and mourn their business. Yeah. And some people had not even done that and they couldn't really go forward. So I thought, we're in lockdown conditions, and I live in Melbourne as well, where we had almost 4 months of lockdown last year. You sure did. And I thought, this is the opportunity that presents itself. I did the podcast for that industry. That's how it came about. That's a long way for me to answer your question, but essentially that's the basis or the reason why the podcast was born.
Yeah, and that gives me such a better understanding of it all as well. How is everyone doing?
I think it really depends where they are located. In Australia, things are moving quite fast in terms of opening up massively. People didn't used to be able to meet. Now suddenly we just had a Victorian tourism conference that had 900 people, and there was just an exhibition in Brisbane. I think it was a truck show. It was a 3-day truck show. And they had more than 30,000 people through. Things have changed massively in Australia. So there's a lot of confidence coming back, although it's still a little bit patchy. The regional areas are doing really well, but the city areas, there's still a bit of fear. I think people are tending to prefer more isolated places to have their conferences. It is happening, but they're being quite selective. But if you go to Malaysia right now, they're in lockdown, and
Right.
so is Singapore. So they're just looking for, at the moment, emotional and mental inspiration at the moment. But it's the way we're trying to figure out the way forward. I guess some of us are at a point where we're saying we just have to learn how to live with COVID.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult for event planners who have to say, I need to plan this event in 6 months' time. And I don't know whether in 6 months, 2 days from that point, whether things are going to shut down.
Yeah.
Will I get my refunds? And everyone else is basically putting their lives on hold for this thing, which might not happen. And just to give you an example of how much of a sliding doors movie this is,
Yeah.
I just went to an event called Destination South Australia, which is South Australia's annual showcase, which didn't happen last year, but happened this year. And they invited everyone from, of course, everyone that was domestic within Australia who could come. Our international borders are, of course, still closed. People from Perth couldn't come because they had some issues there with their lockdowns. And Victoria had a few cases starting to come up just before we were due to go to South Australia.
Yeah.
And then because of those cases, Victorians were asked to fly in a day early to get COVID tested and quarantine in the hotel until we got our results, which should take about 24 hours.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay. And a few of us had to cancel because we couldn't do the extra day. But for those of us who did fly in, the day that we flew in, we found out that South Australia was closing its borders to Victoria.
Oh,
so if
wow.
we had come in on the original day that was intended, we would not have been able to go in at all.
No.
So I thought, my life is a movie.
It sure is. And it's so up and down. It's really hard to plan anything too far in advance because it's still changing day to day, even though the vaccines have been introduced and all that kind of stuff. It's really, not guaranteed at the moment. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for the events industry and tourism to be able to plan anything too far in advance, because it really is a day-to-day waiting game.
It is. And it is a really difficult time for people in the industry, just because you can't plan that far ahead. And even Singapore and Hong Kong had this travel bubble that's, I think, been postponed twice now. Just before it started, the first time was because Hong Kong started to have cases, so they had to cancel it. And then it was rescheduled, and now Singapore's got cases. It's really difficult. And I read a headline by an editor who just said Asia Pacific is maybe the first to have COVID contained, or compared to what's happening in North America and in Europe.
Yes.
We are the last to travel.
Yeah.
Because we are so careful, especially some Asian countries have had the experience of SARS. So they are super prompt to get into action the minute they see something pop up. They want to shut it down. So there is less travel happening. But it's just an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for things like podcasts and other things that are digital and online, that's really been an avenue or area that people have just had to adopt and start using to have any sort of visibility or activity happening if they were still able to. Obviously, if they were 100% dependent on in person, then that would have significantly just impacted it all. And I can only imagine what that would feel like in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has been a really tough time. So we've touched on the pivoting. So going from, as you mentioned, your history and working with MediaCorp Singapore and Radio Australia, moving into your new role as well. But I'd love to touch on your other pursuit that you mentioned. So helping to grow non-profit soccer academies with world club players. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
This is an interesting one. It's actually more my husband's project, and I got roped in. But the origin of the story started about 10 years ago when there was a cyclone in Myanmar, Cyclone Nargis. I don't know how many people it killed, but a lot, something like 20,000 people or something.
Right.
And somebody reached out from Brazil saying, can we donate some money? Because they knew that my husband worked in charities and also in disaster relief. My husband asked, who are you guys, and what do you do? And I found out that he belonged to a connection of athletes who were many of whom were former professional soccer players.
Right.
And some of them played in the World Cup.
Oh, okay.
Absolute rock stars. They would get recognized at airports, etc. Whoa, instead of just giving us money, why don't you come, bring a team and inspire the young people here as well? And then we'll play a few games, raise some money and see what we can do.
Yeah.
So they ended up bringing a team of 23.
Oh my goodness.
I know. Played teams in 4 Southeast Asian countries. And this was in Thailand, in Malaysia, Indonesia. I can't remember the 4th country. But with the money that was raised, they built 2 schools in Myanmar. And the Myanmar government was really grateful. They couldn't believe as well. I think the team visited Myanmar to present the check. And they couldn't believe that these top-level soccer players that they had watched on TV, because soccer is huge in the Asian region, that they were there in their own country. So that was amazing. And the guys from Brazil thought, this is so amazing. Let's do this every year. They've given up time every year, setting aside up to 2 weeks to come to our part of the world to inspire young people using soccer, because these guys have amazing stories of how they have gone through bullying, how because of their small size, they were discounted from any potential career on the world stage in soccer. All these kinds of stories that it just relates to young people.
Yeah.
And they go, if you can do that, I can do that too. The last 4 years, they have been coming to Melbourne because we have such a huge community of migrants and refugees. And because they kept coming, and we, through connections and the various projects that we were doing, the government gave us a grant, $1 million, to start a soccer academy that was Brazilian themed. So 2 Brazilian coaches and their families have moved to Australia, to Melbourne.
Yep.
And so we have this academy that's running mostly at the moment Afghan students, South Sudanese, Iranian, and a couple of others, but it's very mixed. A couple of Australians in. Their whole thing is about mixing with different cultures, because sometimes it's very easy to just stay in silos in your cultural group. Even though you've migrated to Australia, it's very easy just to stay within your ethnic community, and not to venture out too much at all. And you don't foster that understanding of other cultures and working together harmoniously, and just understanding the differences and appreciating that. So that's the whole idea of the Soccer Academy, and it's expanding. We're starting another one in the northern part of Melbourne, and the whole goal is to make this go national eventually. So that's the vision, and we're just really excited about what's happening.
How exciting. I can't wait to see it, continuing to develop and grow. And what a wonderful backstory to it and how it all began. I didn't know about all of that. So thank you so much for sharing it. Now, the third pursuit that you mentioned was direct response copywriting and helping good products and services really stand out in a noisy market. And boy, is the market noisy, particularly online, with the fact that 2020 brought COVID and lots of different organizations and businesses realizing the value of being online and going digital. There is quite a lot of noise in all different directions, which can feel quite overwhelming. So can you tell me a little bit more about, that adventure that you're going on?
Yeah, that's a new adventure for me. I think I mentioned to you that my travel trade writing does not pay very much. The experiences, the trips are worth thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And that's really why I stay and do it, because it's such an interesting industry. The people I meet are interesting and the trips are amazing. So that's why I'm still there. But it doesn't pay very much. So sometimes when you do have a skill and you're finding that it's not really helping you move towards your financial goals, what then you need to do is find a more expensive problem to solve. In the marketplace, copywriting, I didn't realize was so huge. I've always been interested in marketing, in consumer behavior. Those were some of the units that I studied at university. And I thought, this is fascinating because there's a bit of psychology and why we behave the way we do. Why do we buy certain things and not other things? And what was the language or the process, or perhaps sometimes when you have an encounter with a great salesperson and I'm like, you're suddenly walking home with something that you didn't intend to buy. So I'm like, what goes on around all of that? And I also realized that there are a lot of people who have products and services that serve other people and they don't know how to put it out. They don't know the language. They don't know the words that get the clicks. So I thought, if I can use my skills for words to do that, because it's a very specific skill. There is a specific structure in emails. There's a specific language, words. Some words we just connect with rather than others. And you would know about this as well. So it's just learning the science of that. It's actually not difficult to learn. You just have to get practice at it. And for me, because I do have an interest, it also needs to connect to who your target market is. What are their fears? What is the language going on in their heads that you can connect with? So for me, that's all really fascinating, because it's the whole idea of how do we present ourselves and then what's really going on in the background.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us all human and mysterious and interesting. So that's an area that I'm just starting to get into. But it also connects for me to storytelling, which connects to my whole radial life as well. So how you tell a story and even the structure in the story. How do you make that work so that a person stays with you? And even in news writing, this is how we've been trained to write with a particular structure so that you've got your attention grabbing headline.
Yes.
And you get the important gist right at the top, and then you flow down to give more of the detail and how that has a particular flow as well.
Yeah, and I love the way you've made the connection between your experience for over 20 years working in radio and working in that industry, how it's now flowed on to your current role and how you're moving into your new adventure.
Yeah.
I find that no matter what we do in life, we always tend to come back to these, what I call transferable skills. It may be for a different industry, it may be for a different niche, but we learn so much over the years that we then, all the decisions we make in the future and the adventures that we go on tend to be tied in somehow to what we've done in the past, even if it doesn't look exactly the same way. Yeah.
I know so many people who are in transition right now. Yeah. They've had successful businesses, they've done successful things, but they're at the moment just in a place where for whatever reason, they could not continue doing that anymore. And they're just finding themselves a little bit lost. And I'm like, these are some of the most talented, skillful people that I know. And I'm like, why are you feeling this way? And for me, because I've been listening to a couple of coaches, I've been in a couple of programs, I've started to recognize the importance of mindset.
Yeah.
And that's almost cliche. You hear about mindset everywhere, but you don't really appreciate how important it is and how game-changing it is until you actually apply it to yourself and go, oh my goodness. And mindset is work. You can realize that you need to change your thinking, but unless you practice the new thinking, maybe paste it on your wall somewhere, chalkboard or post-it note somewhere, so that you are living out that, identity, that new identity, it's really hard to get over the line and move forward. Yeah, just a whole lot of people in transition right now who can't see their own skills and how to transfer that into a new world, into a new direction.
Yeah.
And it's just worth it to do an exercise that looks back and just takes apart what your skills are. I had to do that exercise myself. I'm still going through that exercise because sometimes you just don't see it, your own genius, your own value, because you're so used to it. You've done it all the time. You can't see it yourself. And sometimes you do need other people to pull it out for you, to say, hey, that's what I see in you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So once you start doing exercises that makes you write down the actual skills and how they might apply to a different market,
Mm.
then suddenly new worlds open to you. But unless you do those exercises, you're going to be pretty much stuck in your current mindset, which might not be helping you.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm all about positioning the mindset in the right way. I usually run a little session before my workshops around mindset because of topics like digital marketing and SEO not being second nature to absolutely everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tend to walk in already with a brick wall or a barrier.
Yeah.
Don't break those thoughts and those barriers down. You can train until the cows come home, but if that mind isn't set in a particular way and isn't open to new information and being able to digest that, then you're still not going to be able to learn or adapt or use the tools and things that are shared in those workshops. And
spot on.
Yeah, the other thing is the difference between motivation and discipline. And that was probably a little lesson that took me a little while to learn, but it was like, oh, today I'm not feeling motivated. And we're not going to feel motivated each and every day when we wake up. But if we've got the discipline, will actually carry us through, and we will still get things done on the days where, we may not feel, so motivated to necessarily do them.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned is over the years, we've prioritized goal making and goal keeping. And I think we are beginning to realize that it's not goals that get us to where we want to go. It's systems, the things that we need to put in place as daily practice. And making sure your environment helps that as well. It's the whole story of, if you really want to lose weight, stop buying chocolates, stop having them available in the pantry. What's in your environment that can help you towards what you want to achieve? So I'm going through all this process myself. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm actually quite terrible at it, but this is what I know I need to do in order to, it's like the old New Year's resolution thing. I do not want to arrive at 1st January 2022 thinking that I'm pretty much in the same position as I was 1st January 2021, as in I do not feel like I've moved forward at all. And so that's what's driving me at the moment. I need to grow, and growth has to be measured as well. If you've written out your goals, usually it's like, I achieved none of those. I've had a whole series of years where I did that. So I'm now focusing on systems in terms of actually getting some results.
Yeah. And what kind of systems, if you're able just to share and elaborate on that point a little bit more?
For me, I've bought some programs and some coaching as well in order to keep my mindset up and to be, challenged from my old mindset. So those require daily check-in, or not, sometimes almost daily check-ins. So that's one system that I have, but also systems like I'm starting to outsource things as well. And as much as they're accountable to me, I need to be accountable to them.
Yes.
And that keeps things moving along. What else? In terms of systems, I'm trying to create what I talked about, environment. So changing my environment so that good habits are easier to keep and the bad habits. And I had one of my coaches was like, he's pretty addicted to video games, or he can, I won't say addicted. Once he gets on a game, he spends a lot of time, too much time on it.
Sounds like my household.
And he found that just disconnecting it from the power source became a barrier to him playing the game. So it's just as easy as that, unplugging the thing. And he thought, that's one extra step I have to do in order to play the game. And he found that he wasn't as drawn to it as he was before. So it's just little things like that. So my whole thing is to start noticing where I'm being pulled into bad habits, and then try to figure out how do I make that harder. Although chocolate's very hard to give up, I must say.
I've had to give it up of late, and it is hard. Coffee and chocolate. So no dairy, no caffeine, and it is hard. But
those are hard,
they're hard. But once you put it into practice, going back to them and trying to have them is difficult too. So it's all about just creating, as you said, that distance between the things that are going to be distracting, or like chocolate or, coffee or what have you. And having a new mindset and creating a new mindset about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, love it. One question I'd love to ask, through all these different experiences and wonderful adventures that you're trekking on now, hindsight can be a really good thing. But yeah, is there anything that you would do differently and why? And if you can explain just, maybe a couple of examples that represent some highs and lows and anything that you would change if you could go back in a time machine and go back in time.
Wow, that's a hard one. There's not a lot that I would change, basically because I value the learning that I got out of even the things that didn't go as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing I might have, I probably should have done, although this is not like life and death, is go for more opportunities that were presented to me. So, for example, in Singapore, I was doing radio work and I was really happy because I was doing something that I was passionate about. But there were opportunities to try out for TV. And I thought, no, I won't pursue that because I'm happy in radio, because contentment to me was something that I valued as well.
Yeah.
But looking back, it's not a too big a deal. Just being able to put that on my resume, sometimes now looking back, might help me get opportunities to do some of the other things that I might want to do.
Yes.
So that's in the scheme of things, it's no biggie, but
No.
I think I would have gone for more opportunities and also putting in for awards, I guess. I wasn't interested in awards. So I always took awards with a bit of a pinch of salt. I'm like, that's no teller of the person's character, for example, which is what I value. And for me, I know a whole number of people who are so skilled and so talented and whose work is so important that don't get awards. But looking back, I think I probably should have sought out awards that I could apply for, because just the act of getting even a commendation or something or other for an award, it's something that you can add to your resume when you start your own business, for example, and you need to earn confidence from clients. So I think, in hindsight, that would be one thing. The other thing that I experienced, which I was not prepared for, was bullying in the workplace. I did not see that coming because I'm such an optimist, and I think everybody loves to be my friend because I'm so friendly. And where it came from as well, I did not quite expect, because it came from somebody that I trusted. And when that happened, it just spun me mentally, and I understood what it meant to be in a different mental space when you have felt like, I can't think of the word for it, but when you felt like some of you has been taken out and you're not yourself anymore. I think I would have liked to have been a little bit more prepared for that. I don't think anybody really prepares to be bullied, but I think to recognize it early, I think is really important, and to do something about it, to talk to people about it, to look for resources, because there are ways to deal with it. And also you need to protect yourself from that situation of being in a position where you are still exposed to that sort of, I guess, treatment if you're still in a vulnerable place.
Yeah. And if you're continuing to work at the same place too.
Yeah. I will say I did have a happy ending in the end through management. It did take a couple of years because I did not want to let this person know how I felt and things like that, because I actually thought he should know better.
Yeah.
Because this person was a senior role person. But it took a couple of years, but eventually there was a reconciliation. So I'm really happy about that. This person asked for forgiveness, and there was no qualification attached to that, no ifs, buts, nothing. And I just accepted it. So I think it's good for me as well to just move on and forgive.
Yes.
And we're all in a happier place.
That's great to hear. And it is, as you mentioned as well, in looking back and examining the things that you could have, would have, should have done. I'm sure there's lots of it for many of us. But one important point that you did mention was you learn from the things that don't go so well, more so than from the things that do.
That's true.
And I'm a firm sort of believer of that too in my business. It's more, I've learned more from the things that went wrong than from the things that went right, because yes, you find new systems, you find different ways, you learn that lesson and you start to change and adapt things to make things start to work again. That's great. And thank you so much for sharing that, the bullying and that with us as well. I know that's not an easy subject to speak about, so really appreciate that.
No, you're quite welcome. I think it's just something that we need to talk a bit about more often, just to make it okay for other people to talk about it as well. So yeah,
agree. Definitely agree with you there. Now we're getting onto the topic of visibility. And again, you've had lots of different experiences in your career, in business. But what do you think has been key for you in building up your own visibility in the different areas that you've been working in? Do you feel it's been more an online thing or an offline thing? What's your take on that?
I think to a certain extent, visibility has been a part of my career, because when I first got into radio, you get the glamour shots done, and the station has to publicize the fact that we have a new program and these are the hosts, etc. So it was always part of that story. And I remember even at Radio Australia, when I was part of the morning show, they had this huge banner. Billboard's the right word. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was over the Tonle Sap River between Cambodia and Laos. So it was massive. It was and unfortunately, it was so long ago, and we didn't have good cameras on our phones then, unfortunately. So I wish I had a photo of it, but I don't. Visibility was always a part of my career. And things changed a little bit when I started doing my own thing. So I don't have a platform anymore in that sense where I'm attached to a particular radio station. And now I have to do things on my own.
Yeah.
So I wasn't that fussed about my own visibility, because I was still trying to find my feet. I still am, really. But I guess in hindsight, podcasting has given me visibility, and it's been amazing, because sometimes they might not even have heard an episode, but I'll go somewhere and somebody who is a CEO of some massive thing will say, yeah, I saw your post about that. So, that person may not have heard the episode, but they've seen me post about it. So to me, podcasting is a long game.
Yeah.
It's a more competitive space now, because we've had a lot more podcasts produced last year.
Yes.
During COVID, and there's still more being produced as it becomes more accessible, it becomes more of a thing.
Yeah.
And also, because I'm interviewing certain people, they start to talk about it as well.
Yes.
And they are helping give me visibility, I guess you could put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's been a really interesting exercise. It's been more visibility than I counted on.
Yeah.
But it's certainly helping in terms of, can I interview you? And they see who I've interviewed before as well. And they say, oh yeah, it's within what I do and who I would normally associate with in a similar industry.
Yes.
And they're more likely to say yes. So it is an interesting exercise. I don't know where it's going to particularly lead me, because my business is still developing its identity and all of that.
Yeah.
But I feel good about it. It's headed in the right direction.
Fantastic. And in the introduction, I also mentioned that when you launched the podcast, it went to the top 5 in 4 countries on the Apple podcast charts in 2020. Yes. So that's fantastic visibility, and being able to get that listed on your resume, so to speak, is a great thing to mention and to be incredibly proud of. But I think all the pieces of the puzzle are definitely coming together for you, and just seeing the connection between the different paths and adventures that you're taking. It's certainly going to evolve into something exciting, and I can't wait to see what is.
And look, if I can do it, get to the top charts in a couple of countries, anybody can, honestly, because I was a nobody, and what I did was follow a strategy from one of my coaches. And there is some algorithm work in it.
Yep.
But you're basically aligning yourselves with other people who can help also spread the word.
Yes.
And the main thing is to get people to download in the first week of your launch. And the more numbers you get, your ratings, your reviews, your download numbers, etc., they all count towards it. And I really could not believe the result. In Malaysia, I was number 1.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm number 1, and I beat Tim Ferriss and Gary Vee.
That's amazing.
I know this is not going to happen again because I was playing the algorithm a little bit. That platform that it gives you and being able to say that is amazing. And I'm glad I had people in Malaysia who were saying that they were listening to my podcast in the office. There was beam throughout the office. So everybody in the office was listening to it. And I'm like, that made me so happy.
Fantastic. That is awesome.
So it's so rewarding when you get a surprise email or message from somebody who says, thank you for doing this podcast because we need it so much, especially in this time, going through COVID and lockdowns, etc. So I am very grateful.
Amazing. And do you have any final tips that you can share with our audience today? Something that you've maybe learned that we can walk away and do that might help us in our day-to-day life or business?
I think I'll go back to measuring your growth and working on systems rather than goals. And I did hear somebody say, and I thought that was really wise, especially for somebody like me who can be very prone to signing up for too many webinars and things like that. But to stop getting out a pen and start getting out your highlighter. Because if you're like me, we're trying to find the next bit of information that might make a difference, that might level up my game. But how many times do we write notes from a webinar, etc., and we don't look back at it?
Yep.
So it's easy to fall into that trap of just note taking and not taking action.
Yes.
So speaking to myself, time to put the pen down, take out the highlighter, going back to those notes and just highlighting the bits where you need to take action and go from there.
I absolutely love that. And I'm going to be getting my highlighter out and doing exactly the same thing. And yes, always encourage people who attend workshops and webinars and so forth to do the same. It's really about taking the action once you've taken the time to invest in learning something new. But without action, it's just going to sit on the paper and not really do a lot for you. So I absolutely love that. It's going to stick in my brain, I know, for the entire day. Thank you, Adelaine. So if our audience would like to get in contact with Adelaine, I'll be adding all of her contact details and social links to this episode on the website. But I just want to thank you again for making time and spending it with our audience. I know you've inspired many to have a think about podcasting and also the visibility that this builds for you and your pursuits. And I look forward to seeing your adventures and what's to come for you in the future.
Thank you so much, Doris. This was so much fun. This chat was amazing. And I'm so glad I got to meet you.
Excellent. I'm glad we got to meet too. And I'm look forward to staying connected as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Adelaine.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving this show a listen. And don't forget to leave your feedback and rating, as this would make me very happy. Now, if you want to learn more about me or my services, please jump on over to letsgetvisible.com.au, where you'll also find links to my socials so you can connect there as well. Okay, well, that's a wrap for another episode. So I'll join you next time on the Let's Get Visible podcast.